For those of you who don't know, there was an election in Romania recently. There was a first round where a bunch of different presidential candidates went for the main office, and the end result of the first round of the election was that Călin Georgescu and Elena Lasconi won. As Călin Georgescu, he got 22.94%. You can see this here. And Elena Lasconi got 19.18%, meaning that Călin Georgescu ended up winning the first round of the vote. Now, if you look at this Wikipedia page, it says first round annulled, as in made void. Made void? Well, that's kind of interesting. Why was it made void? Well, first off, Călin Georgescu, he was not seen as a likely winner. The polls before the election had him in the single digits, and his campaign was largely on, well, TikTok. And he was largely trying to reach the people on TikTok. And so nobody had any idea that he was going to end up getting through the first round, let alone winning the first round. In fact, many people thought it was going to be a fight between someone like Elena Lasconi and the current leader, the more left-leaning candidate. But no, he was completely knocked out. And it was just these two. And everybody started thinking like, whoa, where did this come from? This guy kind of just came out of nowhere. And then there was a lot of panic across much of Europe and also amongst sects of Romanian society, because Călin is not what you would say, he's not a traditional liberal. First off, he's called Putin a very wise man. And he is somebody that is seen as someone who's going to be a lot more reconciliatory towards the Russians. And so, for example, that agreement that was made to send over that air defense system, the Patriot system, over to Ukraine, you wouldn't necessarily see more of that under his administration. He hasn't said out publicly, I will cut off every single thing. But many people suspect that to be the case. And he has also said that he wants to stop Romania being used as an exit port for Ukrainian grain. After the Russians tried to block off Ukrainian grain exports in the Black Sea, what the Ukrainians did is use Romania, and Romania allowed them to do so, to help export their grain to get it to international markets, since it's one of the few abilities for the people of Ukraine to earn revenue, for the farmers to earn revenue, since, you know, Ukraine is known for its wide open fields and its tons of grain and sunflowers and such. But he says he wants to be done with that. He also believes in a lot of wacky conspiratorial nonsense. Think of a crazy theory that exists. There's a 50-50 chance that he believes it, like some adrenochrome nonsense or something along those lines. Like that, he just go Google Călin Georgescu conspiracy theories, and you can find the results for yourself. But a really interesting point that I think should be brought up is he's also a big fan of fascists. And when I say fascists, I don't mean like, oh, he liked Donald Trump, or oh, he liked, he liked that guy with the edgy podcast who, said that mean thing about like the feminists. No, I mean like the Iron Guard. I mean like the Romanian Iron Guard. I mean like the fascist party in Romania that was horribly anti-Semitic, engaged in horrific violence against them, hated democracy, hated communism, but also hated democracy, and was, let's just say, out there. Hardcore, as extreme fascist as you can probably get in the region. Now, he praised these people as heroes of Romania. So, if you want to get his type of temperament, he is somebody who is perfectly willing to strongly align himself with the far right. Not only in calling someone like Putin a lovely guy, a very wise guy, but also in praising fascists. And I want to say, for all of the anti-fascist supporters of Putin, who's like, oh, he's going up there to clean the Nazis. I mean, he's going to use Rusich and a bunch of neo-Nazi units to do it, but he's going in there to clean up the Nazis. It's kind of weird how a lot of Europe's fascists seem to be very favorable looking towards the Kremlin. It's just an interesting thing. You would think if Putin was really engaged in an anti-Nazism, anti-fascism campaign across Europe, that all of the fascists of Europe would not be like, woohoo, 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 woohoo. Anyway, point is, he's not what you would call a traditional liberal. And immediately people started asking, where did this guy come from? He had like a 3% or something, like polling, like very low polling before this. He's now winning the first round. And there was like two minds about it. There were some people who were like, and this was something that I was definitely sympathetic for. This is an anti-incumbent wave of elections. This guy is seen as very anti-incumbent, and maybe a Molotov cocktail towards the establishment, as Trump was in 2015 and 2016. And with the economic problems and economic pressures and difficulties that Romanians are facing every day, that they do not think the political establishment and the traditional candidates are going to deal with or have dealt with to this point, they're throwing it to somebody like him, even if he hasn't exactly shown a pathway forward to get them out of that, those economic problems, those economic pressures. He can hurt the establishment, tear it up, stir some stuff up, and then maybe break us out of this cycle towards something different, an anti-establishment vote. And so now, under that wave, maybe someone like him could win. I mean, think about it, because I think most Romanians, when I say hail the Iron Guard and start goose-stepping everywhere and finding all the Jews, they're like, no, I don't think they want to do that. Do I think that they believe in all of the wacky conspiracy theories that he believes in? No, I don't think so. Do I think that most Romanians think Putin is a very wise man? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. But I do think that most Romanians are sick of the political establishment and would like to see some change. And for them, this is certainly, change. And so that was the first way of thinking about it. The second way of thinking about it was, something's up. No, I don't believe it. Somebody did something. This is a pro-Russian candidate who went from obscurity to winning the first round, and his campaign was largely located online on places like TikTok. There are even some Romanian politicians and political figures who are accusing TikTok of manipulating the algorithm in order to get him to win, which of course TikTok has denied. But now, as we were getting ready for the final round of the election between Colin and Elena this weekend, or I believe it was Monday. It was either this weekend or Monday. So we're like 72 hours away from the second round of the presidential election. The parliamentary election has already gone through. The far right has made games, but the pro-European parties still kept a majority. As we're like 3 days away, the Constitutional Court, the reason this is annulled, decided to overturn the election results. Let's listen about it. Let's hear their logic. And the reason they gave, if you're curious, is Russian interference.
Now to Romania, where the top constitutional court has cancelled the presidential election, annulling the result of the first round, which was held 2 weeks ago. The announcement comes just days after security services revealed details of what appears to have been a major attempt to interfere in the country's presidential election using the social media platform TikTok, with a series of cyber attacks as well. Well, the results of that first round saw Călin Georgescu, an almost unknown far-right NATO skeptic who had vowed to end aid to Ukraine if he won.
I must have missed that part. I remember hearing somewhere he was a little bit more flip-floppy on it and he wasn't talking about, but no, I guess I missed that. Well, yep. And aid to Ukraine and their ability to use their country to export their grain, which is, of course, what the Russians wanted to do with the Black Sea blockade.
He won with most votes. Now, the court said it made the move to ensure the correctness and the legality of the electoral process. But let's talk more about it with our correspondent, Sarah Rainsford, who can join us right now from Romania. Sarah, just explain why you think this Constitutional Court has made this decision and what the reaction has been.
Well, it's something of a political bombshell here in Romania after a couple of weeks of complete turmoil in politics. You know, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen here from one minute to the next, because it was 2 weeks ago now that a total unknown, essentially a very little known character from the far right of Romanian politics emerged, only campaigning on TikTok, to win the first round of the presidential election. Now, after that...
Again, when I say he campaigned on TikTok, maybe I didn't emphasize enough. It was just TikTok. He wasn't doing like tons of rallies with huge crowds. He was like, this would be like if I was on Twitter and I was like, yo, and Chelsea, I was running against like Chelsea Clinton and I guess like a very old, maybe the Kathy Hochul and like all these. I was like, well, Kathy Hochul, she's made New York suck. Gavin Newsom, more like Gavin Sucksum. Chelsea Clinton, more like fuck you, right? And I'm on Twitter and I'm posting all this stuff. And then I win the Democratic primary. It'd be a little hard to believe. It would be hard to believe.
There was a lot of concern about how fair that vote had been, how he had managed to surge to the top as an essentially unknown character, particularly because his politics were from the far right, because he was very sympathetic to Russia, very sceptical about NATO. Now, what we had this week was an unprecedented release of intelligence documents by the authorities here, which suggested that his meteoric rise had actually been down to an influence campaign that was conducted and coordinated from outside of this country. That was the allegation. And now this latest move, the Constitutional Court, judges there voting that the entire presidential election has to be cancelled and started again from scratch. So we're in utterly uncharted territory, and the reactions have been extraordinary. The second round vote was meant to take place on Sunday with Călin Georgescu, that frontrunner, facing a candidate called Elena Lasconi. Now, she's come out and she's condemned the court, saying that their move was actually illegal and immoral. She said it's a threat to democracy. The vote should have gone ahead. We haven't heard yet from Călin Georgescu, but I think it's safe to say that...
I imagine part of the reason why she's not happy about it is because she got into the second round, and there's a chance that she could have won on Sunday and become the next president of Romania. And for those of you who don't know, the reason why it would be particularly bad if this guy won is because there's you know, the prime minister and the president. The prime minister largely deals with domestic affairs. The president is the commander-in-chief and deals with things like foreign affairs and represents Romania on the world stage, meaning this would be the guy representing Romania when it comes to EU votes, and he could back up Viktor Orban in opposing aid packages and other stuff for Ukraine, as well as, you know, canceling aid to Ukraine, stopping, you know, their Romania's assistance to Ukraine in all different sorts of manners, whether it's allowing them to ship electricity into the country during the blackouts this winter, or it's, you know, the grain deals, etc. And so him winning president would be a blow to European Union unity against Russian encroachment in the region. So that is why people were pretty nervous about it. But if they do a redo, that other woman who's trying to challenge him as the face of the pro-EU, you know, people, she's like a center-right politician, Lena, she might not get into the second round next time. Maybe next time it's going to be some lefty and some other guy. Maybe it'll be Colin and a different person. Who knows what it'll be. And instead of her, she'll be knocked out in the first round. And so maybe she's angry about that. Maybe she thinks this will just make it harder for them in the long run. Maybe she has some internal polling that suggested that she was going to beat him or something along those lines. I don't know. I do not know.
As I said, nobody knows what's going to happen next here in Romania.
Right, so we don't know then the vote that was scheduled for Sunday, whether it goes ahead or not. Presumably it doesn't.
No, we know that that vote is not going to happen. The whole election is going to be run from scratch, including the campaigning. So we're waiting for a government to announce the date of the beginning of campaigning. But at the moment, we don't even have a government here in Romania. In fact, there were parliamentary elections last week as well, and there is still negotiations underway to form a coalition. So there's nobody to give us the date for the next election, so no idea really when that could take place. In the meantime, there have been protests here over the past few days. People really worried about these allegations of possible Russian interference in the elections. You know, actual fear that perhaps the tentacles of Moscow are stretching all the way here to Bucharest and using online platforms like TikTok to distort politics. So we were speaking to people here on the streets who are really, really worried about that. You know, don't forget this is a country with a long history of dictatorships and a long, cool relation, let's say, with Russia since then. So lots of fears on that front. Călin Georgescu himself, I met him this week as well. He denied in any sense being Moscow's man. He is a populist politician who says he's the man of the people. He says he has an agenda for change in Romania and he wants to implement that. So I can imagine he is going to be angry too about what the Constitutional Court has now done.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see his reaction to that, and we'll bring that to you when it comes in. Sarah Rainsford, thank you very much for the moment. Sarah Rainsford.
Okay, so let's look at what evidence and what is being brought forward here, because obviously this is a big announcement. I was not ready for this when it came on stream. I should have known about it, but I was distracted by, well, number one, sleeping, because I'm preparing to do an embed this weekend. I'll talk about it probably next week. And I've just been busy with, of course, everything happening in Syria. But I wanted to go and look at the evidence that the Constitutional Court is putting forward and other politicians are putting forward. We have been aware that Russia is trying to interfere with our election, said Siegfried Muresan, a member of the European Parliament from the center-right National Liberal Party. Their interference has accelerated over recent months, and Romania's election was a test for the resilience of the whole European Union. In a binding decision, so like they're not throwing it out. The Romanian court canceled Sunday's runoff and invalidated a November 24th first round that saw Georgescu, a 62-year-old agricultural scientist, stage a meteoric rise to clinch first place. Georgescu campaigned with no political party and declared no advertising budget, but propelled by viral content on TikTok, he went from 1% support in the polls a month ago to, I said 3%, I was being generous, to 22.9%. Romania's security services pointed to Russian interference to explain his sudden success. Documents declassified Wednesday concluded that a Russian-backed operation helped manipulate TikTok algorithms to boost Georgescu's popularity. TikTok executives grilled this week in the European Parliament said the Chinese company had identified and removed 66,000 suspicious accounts and blocked 260,000 spam posts related to the Romanian elections. On Thursday, EU regulators also ordered TikTok freeze and preserve data related to the Romanian presidential elections. So if this is EU regulators doing it, if TikTok wants to continue to be able to operate in the EU, because they do have the regulatory potential to take them out back and basically shoot TikTok Europe in the, like old Yeller, then they're going to have to cooperate with the European Union. Now, the Chinese company has denied, working to manipulate this and working to manipulate that. And it could be true that they didn't want to do that, or they didn't do it on purpose. It's impossible for me to say. I won't push it one way or the other unless I have more information. I'm not even going to speculate. But either way, it is very, 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 very like the Russians to engage in this type of behavior. And honestly, I assume that they're doing this in basically every election anyway, honestly. We saw the Romanian, the Moldovans have a very, very chaotic election. And when I say chaotic, I mean as in there was vote buying accused, there was Russian influence accused that had sufficient evidence where people were coming up saying, oh, this person paid me to be here. I just went and voted for the candidate that told me to. I'm now waiting for my payment, like right outside the voting booths. And there was even, I think it was millions and millions and millions of dollars that ended up being said that was actually funneled into Moldova. Man, it's been a bit, and I've been distracted by Syria to go back there. But we talked about it at the time. The Russian influencing the Moldovan election to try to get an outcome that would see it as less EU-friendly, and they wanted to defeat the referendum in Moldova, which was asking the people whether they wanted to join the European Union before then having an election to see if they were going to keep their pro-European Union president. They ended up winning both votes. The first vote by a hair, barely voting the Romanian population to join the European Union, and the woman who is the current leader of Moldova, Sandu, she ended up winning the election a little with a larger margin, largely due to the diaspora of Moldovans who, when their votes came in, it really put her over the top. Same thing when it comes to the European Union integration. It was the diaspora that came in and put it over the top. And so it was close. You know, the European Union vote still won, even if it was slightly. It's not a gigantic mandate. And the pro-EU woman still won. But the accusations of vote buying and interference remained. And we know that the Russians engage in misinformation operations trying to spread information to influence elections. We know they do it in the United States. The Internet Research Agency, which was Prigozhin's organization, I don't know if you know, but Yevgeny Prigozhin, before he was head of the Wagner Group, he was working with the Internet Research Agency, which was set up to spread misinformation during the American presidential elections to support outcomes that they liked, as in they want this candidate to win over this candidate, as in they wanted Donald Trump to win. And the other thing was just spreading general misinformation to cause discontent amongst society. I remember that there was this time where they were making posts where it would be like, hey guys, go. This is a Black Lives Matter protest we're going to do right over here in Detroit. And they'd make a post about it on Facebook, this Russian account. And then they would go and they'd make another post from a separate account say, hey guys, let's do an anti-BLM protest to protect against these commies in Detroit. And it would be like a block away from the first protest. The point being, they want them to both come, the BLM protesters and the anti-BLM protesters, go to the same place, fight, scuffle, and attack each other. And the reason why is that the United States, if it's divided internally, if it's struggling internally, if you're thinking about fighting your neighbor, scuffling with your neighbor, or God forbid, if it deteriorates enough, shooting your neighbor, then you're not going to be thinking about containing Russian expansionism in Europe. You're not going to think about, trying to confront the Russians when it comes to marching into not only Ukraine, but maybe Moldova, marching into Georgia again, trying to do a coup on Armenia, which there was a story about a few months back. Or, say, hold up Article 5 in NATO, which is something that the Russians wanted to see rolled back. One of the demands at the start of the invasion that Vladimir Putin made to try to stop an invasion of Ukraine was that America's nuclear shield needed to be pulled back from NATO countries in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and all of these countries that are covered by our atomic protection. They wanted to roll back the full power of Article 5 protections because they want to roll back the strength of NATO in the East, because these are areas they want to get more involved in. You don't think the Russian-speaking line could be used like they use in Ukraine and Estonia, Latvia, countries like that have large Russian-speaking populations, or Kazakhstan, or any of these countries where a lot of Russian settlers came either during the Soviet period or before. And so I'm going to be kind of blunt with you guys. I think it's not hard to believe at all that the Russians influenced it. That the Russians tried to spread misinformation and tried to or prop up a certain candidate. This is the behavior they've repeated again and again and again and again and again. Do you think when AfD politicians are doing tours of the Donbass, occupied Donbass, praising it, where do you think that comes from? Where do you think it comes from? I don't think it comes from nowhere. Now, the question of whether or not this should have been overturned, I'm sorry, I'm not a Romanian constitutional scholar or lawyer. If you want to get their perspective, you can Google it yourself. I'm sure if you guys took 20 minutes, you could try to see if it is legal or is unconstitutional, like Lasconi claimed. But yeah, I think they interfered. The question of whether or not the election should have been overturned or whether they should have just gone through with the election, I don't know. Because in my mind, like, if that's the case, then could we have not overturned previous American elections when there was large amounts of Russian influence? Now, I don't really know or think that Russian influence in the American elections in 2016 or 2024 was necessarily a deciding factor. Now, in some states, the votes are so close that maybe if you concentrate this influence in a particular area of states, which of course you can like buy ads in certain areas, you can try to target it, then maybe, but I don't think it was the deciding factor. I think it was a factor that had influence, but I don't think it was the deciding factor. So, but also, we're talking about somebody going from 1% to 22%. This is a lot different than, Donald Trump post-primary. So the situation is a little different over there. Not to mention, the Romanians are right there next to Russia. So I think their immediate presence and vicinity with Russia gives them a little bit more concern. We have Alaska connected to the Russians, but there's an ocean that divides it. And if the Russians tried to do anything, it would end in, well, not bueno times. They would not be welcomed as a Tavares. Either way, man. So they're just gonna have to start the election from scratch. The thing is, he could still win. I mean, if his profile has risen, he can still benefit from that and then get into the second round again. So I don't even think this is the end necessarily. Like, oh, well, now that the scheme has been revealed, the Romanian public will necessarily turn against it. And the Romanian public is anti-establishment, anti-status quo, anti-incumbent enough. I don't know how much that'll matter. I'd like to think that it would have some impact on a voter's mind if they think, well, it is kind of weird that the Russians who really want to have a ton of influence over here, really want to move back in here, they want him to win, and they're trying to manipulate the algorithm to help him win, and are making thousands and thousands of accounts to help him win. I think it should have some impact on their decision-making, but whether it will have enough of an impact to keep him out of getting into the second round or winning the second round, I do not know. The Romanian court did not explain the reasoning behind its ruling, but cited a constitutional provision giving it authority to ensure compliance with the procedure for the election of the president of Romania and confirm the results of the vote. The government will now need to start the process over, holding a new election at an unspecified date. I have no clue where that's going to be. Probably not this year, meaning we're probably going to see the Romanian elections come 2025. Okay, so Paul's ego